It was a chilly evening, the kind that made the glass doors of the Grand Haverly Hotel fog slightly when guests walked in. Inside, the golden lights glowed softly. Music played from hidden speakers and laughter floated above the clinking of glasses. It was one of those nights when everyone looked perfect: polished shoes, glittering dresses, and voices full of self-importance. Among the crowd, moving quietly between the tables, was a young waitress named Lena. She carried a tray with practiced grace, smiling politely at people who rarely looked her in the eye. It wasn't her dream job, but it paid her rent and helped her take care of her younger brother back home. Every time she walked past the grand piano near the stage, she couldn't help glancing at it. The glossy surface reflected the lights like water, and each time she looked at it, something stirred deep inside her. Lena used to play once. Not just for fun, but seriously. Every day after school, every quiet night when the city slept. Her father was a music teacher. He believed she had something special, something that could move people. He used to sit beside her, guiding her fingers across the keys. "Music isn't about how fast you can play," he would say softly. "It's about how deeply you can make someone feel." But that was years ago. Life had taken turns she never expected. When her father passed away suddenly, bills began to pile up. She quit music school and took whatever job she could find. The piano became a memory, something she loved but couldn't afford to touch. That night, the hotel was hosting a private gala for one of the city's richest businessmen, a man known as Alden Royce. His name carried power. People spoke it with a mix of respect and fear. He was in his early 50s, tall, confident, and always surrounded by people eager to please him. The moment he entered the room, everyone seemed to straighten their posture and lower their voices. Lena noticed the shift instantly. She'd served at enough events to recognize the kind of atmosphere powerful people carried with them. Royce sat at the center table, laughing loudly, surrounded by people who laughed even louder, even when his jokes weren't funny. Hours passed, and the party grew louder. Wine flowed, the air filled with perfume and chatter, and the music from the speakers seemed to fade under the sound of expensive conversations. Lena kept moving between tables, collecting glasses, replacing plates, and pretending not to hear the rude comments some guests made about the staff. She had learned to keep her head down. As she passed by Royce's table, she heard him complaining about how dull the night was getting. "All this money and not a single thing worth remembering," he said, swirling his drink. His assistant laughed nervously, agreeing with him instantly. Then Royce's eyes landed on the grand piano in the corner. "What's the point of that thing if no one's playing it?" he asked. His tone was half amused, half mocking. "Do any of you know how to play?" No one answered. A few people laughed, others looked away. He turned his gaze toward the serving staff. "What about one of you? Surely someone here can give us a bit of real entertainment." Lena froze for a second. She felt one of her co-workers glance at her. He whispered softly, "Lena used to play." Royce's head turned sharply. "Oh, really?" His eyes scanned her name tag. "Lena, was it?" She nodded slightly, already wishing she could disappear. "Come here," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Let's see what you can do." Her heart thumped. "Sir, I'm just working tonight," she said politely. "I haven't played in a long time." He smiled, but it wasn't kind. "Then this is your chance to remember." The way he said it wasn't a request, it was a command disguised as charm. People around the table began to murmur, amused by the idea. "Come on," someone said. "Let's hear her play." Lena's fingers tightened around the tray she was holding. Every part of her wanted to refuse, to say she didn't have time. But she could feel the eyes of her manager from across the room, silently urging her not to upset the most powerful guest there. So she nodded slowly and placed her tray on a nearby table. As she walked toward the piano, her shoes clicked softly on the marble floor. The room quieted a little, curiosity spreading through the crowd. She sat down on the bench, her hands trembling. The smell of polished wood and old strings filled her senses, and suddenly she was back in her father's small living room, where the walls were lined with sheet music. Her fingers hovered above the keys, but she couldn't bring herself to play. She heard someone whisper behind her. "She's scared." Another person chuckled. Royce tilted his head, pretending to be patient. "Whenever you're ready, dear." "We're waiting." She took a slow breath. Her heart was racing, her palms damp. She hadn't touched a piano in nearly 4 years. What if she made a mistake? What if she embarrassed herself in front of all these people? She closed her eyes for a moment and remembered her father's voice again. Music speaks when you cannot. Something in her shifted. She placed her fingers gently on the keys. The first sound she made was small, almost hesitant, but it was real. A single note, then another. Her hands began to remember what her mind had forgotten. Slowly, a melody began to form. At first, people whispered among themselves, not paying much attention. But within seconds, the tune changed. It became soft and emotional, the kind of melody that wrapped around the heart quietly. Her touch was light but sure, and even though her hands trembled, the sound was pure. Royce stopped mid-sentence, turning his head slightly. The people around him grew silent, unsure why they suddenly felt drawn to listen. Lena's mind drifted far from the room. She wasn't playing for them anymore. She was playing for the night she spent alone in her small apartment, dreaming of something better. She was playing for her father, who never got to see her grow. She was playing for the little girl who once believed that music could change the world. The melody grew richer, filling every corner of the room. The clinking of glasses stopped. Conversations faded. Even the waiters stood still for a moment, caught off guard by the power of something so simple. When she finally hit the last note, it lingered in the air like a sigh before fading into silence. The entire room was still. For a moment, no one clapped. No one spoke. It was as if everyone forgot where they were. Then someone near the back whispered, "Wow." And suddenly applause filled the hall. Royce leaned back in his chair, watching her quietly. His smirk was gone. There was something else in his eyes now, something close to respect. He clapped slowly, his expression unreadable. Lena stood up quickly, cheeks flushed, trying to step away from the piano. She didn't want to make a scene. But before she could move, Royce spoke again. "Where did you learn to play like that?" he asked. She hesitated, unsure how to answer. "My father taught me," she said softly. "A long time ago?" Royce nodded slightly. "You should never have stopped." She didn't know what to say, so she just smiled faintly, murmured a polite "thank you," and stepped away. As she returned to her work, people smiled at her differently now. Guests who hadn't noticed her before were suddenly curious, asking her questions as she served them. But Lena stayed humble, her voice calm. Inside, though, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Pride, mixed with disbelief. Later that night, after most guests had left and the staff began cleaning up, the piano still gleamed in the corner. Lena passed by it again, her fingers brushing lightly against its edge. Her manager walked up behind her. "You were incredible tonight," he said quietly. "I think you made quite an impression on Mr. Royce." She smiled tiredly. "I didn't mean to, I just played," he chuckled. "Sometimes that's all it takes." When she finally left the hotel that night, the air outside felt different. The city lights shimmered like tiny stars across the wet pavement. She walked slowly, hands tucked into her coat pockets, thinking about how a single song had silenced an entire room. She didn't know it yet, but that moment, the night a billionaire forced a waitress to play, was the night everything in her life would begin to change. The morning after the gala, Lena woke to the sound of her alarm buzzing insistently. The city outside her small apartment was just beginning to stir, horns honking, people walking quickly, the distant hum of buses. She rubbed her eyes and sat up, her body still tired from the long night, but in her chest a strange kind of energy was waking with her, one she hadn't felt in years. Her younger brother was already up, quietly eating cereal at the small kitchen table. "You okay?" he asked, glancing up at her with sleepy eyes. Lena smiled faintly. "Yeah, just thinking." She didn't tell him about the performance, not yet. He had always been proud of her music, but the way she had been forced to play in front of that crowd felt too surreal to explain in words. As she got ready for her shift at the hotel, her mind kept returning to the piano. She remembered the feel of the keys under her fingers, the quiet hum of the room as everyone listened, the way the melody had taken over even her own fear. That moment seemed impossible, like it belonged to someone else. When she arrived at the hotel, the lobby was buzzing with the usual morning energy. Guests checking out, staff rushing with luggage, the faint scent of coffee mixing with polished wood. But the gala from last night lingered in the air. A few of the evening staff whispered to each other as she walked by, their eyes catching hers and lingering a moment longer than usual. Lena nodded politely, keeping her focus on the tasks ahead. Her manager approached her quietly, handing her a clipboard. "You're in the main dining hall today," he said, "and Mr. Royce asked to see you for a minute before your shift." Lena's heart skipped. She wasn't sure she was ready to face him again so soon. She straightened her back and followed the manager through the hallways, her shoes clicking softly on the polished floors. When she reached his office, the door opened before she could knock. And there he was, Alden Royce, sitting behind an enormous desk with the morning sunlight reflecting off the gold trim of the room. "Sit," he said, motioning to the chair in front of him. His tone was calm, without the arrogance that usually draped his words. Lena did as he asked, hands folded nervously in her lap. "I've been thinking about last night," he said, leaning back. His eyes studied her, but not in a way that made her want to shrink. "I haven't been moved by music in a long time, you." "Change that." She blinked, unsure how to respond. Compliments from people like him were rare, and sincere ones even rarer. "Thank you, sir," she said softly. He nodded. "I want to help you. You shouldn't have had to give up something so important." Lena's stomach twisted. I don't know what to say. I mean, I don't play for people like you. You're talented," he interrupted gently. "And I'm willing to invest in that talent. I can connect you with people who can help you get back to where you belong." The words hung in the air. Lena had never imagined someone like him noticing her for anything other than the efficiency with which she carried trays. She wanted to ask if it was really true or just a fleeting thought he would forget, but she found herself nodding instead. I'd like that," she said finally. "Good," he said with a small smile. "We'll start slow. Lessons, coaching, maybe even a small performance here and there. Nothing overwhelming." She left his office in a daze, unsure whether to feel excited or nervous. By the time she got to the dining hall, her thoughts were already racing with possibilities. She had dreamed of this chance in the past, but it had always felt out of reach. Now the opportunity seemed real. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. Lena served breakfast trays mechanically, her mind half on the plates she carried and half on the plans forming in her head. When a guest asked for a refill, she realized she was smiling more than usual. Something inside her had shifted. Last night had shown her that she still had the ability to move people, even strangers, even people who seemed untouchable. After work, she returned home to her brother's eager questions. "Did anything happen? Did anyone talk to you about the piano?" he asked. She laughed quietly, brushing her hair back. "Yeah, something like that. But you'll see soon enough." She didn't explain all the details. Some things felt too big to put into words. Over the next few days, Lena began to feel the stirrings of her old life returning. She sat at her small, battered keyboard at home and practiced quietly, fingers remembering melodies they hadn't played in years. Each note felt like a small victory, a reclaiming of something she thought was lost. One evening, Royce called her to the hotel again. This time he wasn't asking her to perform in front of a crowd. He wanted to discuss a small private showcase he was organizing for a select few people who could potentially help her career. The thought made her nervous. Performing for the staff had been terrifying enough, but a private audience with powerful people felt even more intimidating. When she arrived, she found a quiet lounge set up with a few chairs, soft lighting, and a piano in the center. Royce was already there, sitting casually on a leather sofa, watching her with a calm expression. "You're ready," he said simply. "I don't know if I am," Lena admitted. Her voice shook slightly. "You are," he said, almost like he could see the fear and push it away with his words. "Remember last night? You didn't play for them. You played for yourself. That's all you need to do now." She nodded and sat at the piano, letting her hands rest lightly on the keys. The first notes came out slowly, hesitant, but the melody soon grew confident. She played not for applause, not for approval, but for herself. And as she played, something shifted in the room. Royce leaned back, listening quietly, and the few people present seemed drawn into the music, their faces softening. When she finished, there was no need for words. The silence itself was a kind of acknowledgement. Royce smiled, standing and clapping once, then motioning to the others to follow. "This," he said simply, "is why talent should never be hidden." Over the next weeks, Lena began spending more time at the hotel, not as a waitress, but as someone being mentored. Lessons were scheduled, small performances organized, and slowly her confidence returned. Each day she felt herself becoming more than she had been in years, the memory of fear replaced by the joy of creation. But it wasn't always easy. Some nights after long days, she would sit at home and doubt herself again. Old fears crept in, the fear of failure, of being judged, of not being enough. But each time she remembered the way the room had gone silent the first night, the way even Royce had stopped in his arrogance to listen. That memory became her anchor, a reminder that she could do more than she thought. One evening, as she was practicing, her brother peeked into the room. "You sound amazing," he said quietly. "Do you think you'll ever play in front of a big crowd again?" Lena paused, smiling softly. "Maybe one day," she said, "but I'll be ready." By now, news of her performance at the gala had quietly spread through the hotel staff and a few guests. Some were curious, some were impressed, and a few influential people had asked Royce about her. The idea that a waitress could be so talented had sparked interest. Royce, noticing this, decided to arrange a small private showcase outside the hotel. A chance for Lena to play for music producers and mentors who could help her take the next step. When the day of the showcase arrived, Lena felt a mixture of nerves and excitement. She arrived early, touching the piano lightly as she warmed up. The room was simple but elegant, filled with people who knew music, who had heard the whispers about the waitress who could play. She felt a strange calm wash over her. This was what she had been waiting for, a moment where her music could truly speak. Royce stood at the back, watching quietly. "Play like last time," he said softly. "Play for you," and so Lena did. Her fingers moved across the keys with confidence, her heart guiding the melody. Every note was filled with years of longing, of loss, of hope. She didn't play to impress anyone. She played because it was a part of her she had almost lost. By the time the last note faded, the room was silent for a heartbeat, and then erupted in applause. People were smiling, nodding, some with tears in their eyes. She had done it. She had reminded herself why she had started, why she had loved music in the first place. Royce approached her, a rare look of admiration on his face. "You were incredible," he said. "This is just the beginning." For Lena, it felt like the world had shifted. The road ahead was still uncertain, still full of challenges, but she had regained her courage, her music, and her voice. And for the first time in years, she believed that she could finally follow her dream. Weeks passed since Lena's first private showcase, and with every day her life began to feel less like a dream and more like something she could touch. She was no longer just a waitress carrying trays through a crowded dining hall. She was a pianist with guidance, opportunities, and slowly a growing confidence. Every morning she woke up with a mixture of excitement and nervousness, unsure what the day would bring but ready to face it. One rainy afternoon, Lena found herself at the hotel once again, not for work but for a meeting. Royce had arranged a small recital in the hotel's private hall, inviting a handful of music producers, teachers, and mentors. It was more formal than the last showcase, but still intimate, the kind of setting where her performance could make a real impact. As she entered the hall, her stomach fluttered with nerves. The room was quiet except for the soft patter of rain against the windows. Chairs were arranged neatly, and a grand piano gleamed under the soft lights. Lena ran her fingers lightly along its surface, the polished wood smooth and familiar under her touch. Royce stood near the back, observing her quietly. "Relax," he said in his calm voice. "This is your moment. Remember, you don't play for them, you play for yourself." She nodded, taking a deep breath. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the memory of the gala flood her mind. The fear, the hesitation, the silence of the room, followed by the applause. It was all still there, guiding her. When she opened her eyes and sat down, the audience watched expectantly. A few nodded to encourage her. She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. The first notes were soft, hesitant, as if she were feeling the piano again after a long absence. But soon the melody gained strength, each note flowing with emotion. The music she played that day was different from anything she had tried before. It was not just skill or technique. It was a story, a reflection of everything she had experienced: loss, struggle, hope, and determination. The notes rose and fell like waves, sometimes soft and gentle, other times strong and passionate. The audience sat silently, drawn in by the honesty of her performance. A producer leaned forward, his eyes widening. "She's remarkable," he whispered to the person next to him. Even Royce, who rarely showed emotion, watched her closely. His usual reserved expression softened as the music filled the room. He remembered the first night she had played at the gala and realized that what he had seen then was just the beginning. Lena was more than a hidden talent. She was someone who could move hearts. As the last note faded, the room held its breath for a moment. Then slowly the applause began. It started as a gentle clapping, but quickly grew into a wave of appreciation that filled the hall. Lena's hands hovered over the keys, reluctant to move, unsure if she had truly done justice to what she wanted to express. Royce stood and walked toward her. "You've outdone yourself," he said. His voice carried a mix of pride and admiration. "This is more than talent. This is heart." After the recital, several people approached Lena with smiles and words of encouragement. One producer offered to help her arrange recordings, another suggested advanced coaching, and a music teacher offered private lessons to refine her technique. For Lena, it felt like a dream she hadn't dared to imagine. She was no longer invisible. People were beginning to see her for who she truly was. Over the next few days, her routine changed. Mornings were spent practicing diligently, afternoons in lessons, and evenings sometimes performing at small events. Her life was busier than ever, but it was a different kind of exhaustion, one that came from passion and purpose rather than fear and necessity. One evening, as she returned home after a long day of practice, Lena found herself thinking about the first night she had played at the gala. She remembered the fear, the trembling hands, and the hush that had fallen over the room. That memory now felt like a distant shadow compared to the strength she felt inside. She had faced her doubts, embraced her talent, and stepped into a world she had only dreamed of. But success, she realized, wasn't just about talent. It was also about courage. The courage to keep playing even when the audience didn't believe in you. The courage to keep moving forward despite fear, and the courage to trust yourself. Every time she sat at the piano now, she remembered that lesson, and it guided her fingers across the keys with confidence. One afternoon, Royce called her to a meeting. She arrived at his office, wondering what the next step would be. He smiled as she entered. "I have a proposal for you," he said. "There's a charity event coming up. I want you to perform there. It's a larger audience, but I believe you're ready." Lena hesitated. Performing for a crowd of strangers, not just a small room, was intimidating. But she remembered the way she had felt last time. How music could quiet a room, how it could capture attention and emotion. She nodded slowly. "I'll do it," she said. The days leading up to the charity event were filled with preparation. Lena practiced relentlessly, refining every note, every transition, every pause. Her mentor helped her choose a piece that would showcase both her skill and her emotional depth. Every time she played, she imagined the audience in front of her, visualizing the hush that would fall over the room when she began. Finally, the night of the event arrived. The hall was larger than anything she had played in before, filled with hundreds of people dressed in elegant attire. The atmosphere was buzzing with conversation, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Lena felt her heart race as she waited backstage, her fingers brushing the keys of a smaller piano meant for warm-ups. "Remember," Royce said quietly, appearing beside her, "you don't play for them. You play for yourself. Everything else will follow." She nodded, taking a deep breath. The lights dimmed, and an announcer introduced her to the audience. Lena walked to the grand piano at the center of the stage, her footsteps echoing slightly in the vast hall. She sat down, took another deep breath, and let her hands rest gently on the keys. The first notes she played were soft, almost tentative. But as she continued, the melody grew stronger, richer, more confident. Each note carried a piece of her story, the struggles, the losses, the moments of doubt, and the triumphs. The audience began to quiet, leaning forward in their seats, captivated by the honesty and beauty of her music. As she played, Lena noticed that even in the back rows, people were holding their breath, mesmerized. The chatter of the crowd faded completely, replaced by the pure sound of the piano. She played not for applause or recognition, but for the sheer love of music. For the years she had waited to reclaim her voice. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment, as if no one could believe what they had just heard. Then slowly the applause began, swelling into a roar that filled the hall. People stood, clapping and cheering, some with tears in their eyes. Lena's hands hovered above the keys, overwhelmed by the response. Royce stepped forward, clapping loudly. His usual composed demeanor was gone, replaced by genuine admiration. "You've done it again," he said, smiling. "This is what I hoped you could achieve and more." After the performance, several producers approached her with offers and opportunities. One asked if she would record a professional album. Another suggested performing in a larger venue. For the first time in her life, Lena felt that her dreams were within reach. She realized that the courage she had found in the quiet of the hotel gala had grown into something powerful, something that could change her life completely. Back at her apartment that night, Lena sat at her old keyboard, reflecting on everything that had happened. She had gone from a nervous waitress, unsure if anyone would ever care about her music, to a pianist who had silenced a room and captured hearts. She thought about her father, about the lessons he had taught her, and about the journey that had brought her here. She smiled softly, placing her fingers on the keys. The notes flowed easily, filled with emotion and confidence. Lena knew that the road ahead would still have challenges, but she also knew that she had the strength and courage to face them. And for the first time in a long time, she felt truly free, free to play, free to dream, and free to share her music with the world. That night, Lena fell asleep with the sound of the piano lingering in her mind, a reminder that she had found her voice and that it was only just beginning to be heard. The days after Lena's first large performance were full of excitement and exhaustion. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from people she barely knew, producers, teachers, and music enthusiasts, who wanted to meet, collaborate, or just hear more of her music. It was overwhelming at times, but it was a good kind of chaos, one she had never experienced before. Royce, noticing her growing schedule and occasional fatigue, called her to the hotel office one afternoon. Lena entered, still feeling the tension in her shoulders from back-to-back rehearsals and lessons. Royce was leaning against the desk this time, looking more relaxed than she had ever seen him. "You're doing well," he said. "Better than I expected." Lena smiled nervously. "Thank you, sir. But it's a lot. I'm still adjusting." "You'll get used to it," he said. "But there's something else. I want you to perform at a charity gala next month. Bigger than the last one. Hundreds of guests, some very influential people. It's a chance for you to get noticed outside the hotel." Her stomach tightened. The thought of playing in front of a huge crowd again was both thrilling and terrifying. I think I can do it," she said, though her voice wavered. "I know you can," he replied calmly, "but I want you to prepare carefully. I'll have a mentor assist you with the selection and practice. You need to feel ready, not rushed." Over the next few weeks, Lena's life became a delicate balance. Days were filled with lessons, practice, and occasional interviews with people interested in her talent. Evenings were often performances, small but important, building her confidence. She began to notice the way people reacted to her music now. No longer just polite applause, her audience responded with genuine emotion, smiles, tears, or quiet admiration. One afternoon, while practicing at the hotel, Lena felt the familiar pang of self-doubt creep in. She had been rehearsing a particularly difficult piece for the upcoming gala. Her fingers stumbled over the keys more than once, frustration building with each mistake. She paused, resting her forehead on her hands. "I can't do this," she muttered to herself. "I'm not good enough." Just then, Royce appeared quietly behind her. He didn't speak immediately, just watched. Finally, he said softly, "You are good enough. You've already proven that. The mistakes don't define you. How you respond to them does." Lena lifted her head, looking at him. "It feels like I'll never be ready. Everyone will notice if I mess up." "Everyone will notice if you believe in yourself too," he replied, a hint of a smile on his face. "But you won't know until you try." "And you will try. You always do." She nodded slowly, drawing strength from his words. For the first time in days, she felt the frustration ease. She returned to the piano, this time playing with focus and determination. The notes came more smoothly, each one carrying both skill and emotion. The day of the charity gala arrived faster than she expected. Lena wore a simple but elegant dress, her hair pulled back, allowing her focus to remain on the music rather than appearances. She arrived at the hall early, the grand space already filled with hundreds of guests. The air buzzed with polite chatter, the clinking of glasses and the rustle of elegant fabrics. Backstage, she took her place at the piano, feeling the weight of expectation settle on her shoulders. Royce appeared beside her quietly. "Remember," he whispered, "play for yourself. That is the only way to touch others." She nodded, closing her eyes for a brief moment to calm her racing heart. Then she lifted her hands and began to play. The opening notes were soft, almost hesitant, but the sound quickly gained confidence. Lena poured every emotion into the music, the struggles of the past, the joy of the present, the hope for the future. The audience slowly quieted, drawn into the melody. Even the most distracted guests paused, listening intently as the music carried through the hall. Lena noticed subtle changes around her. People leaned forward, their eyes softening. Some closed their eyes, letting the music reach them fully. Royce stood silently in the back, his expression calm but attentive, as if he were measuring not just the performance but the impact of her music. Halfway through, Lena played a melody she had written herself, one she had never shared publicly. It was delicate and haunting, a song that spoke of resilience and hope. The audience reacted unconsciously, caught in the honesty of her music. A hush fell over the room, broken only by the faint sound of her fingers on the keys. When the final note resonated, the silence lingered. Then applause erupted, louder and more heartfelt than anything Lena had experienced before. She rose from the piano, feeling a mixture of relief, joy, and disbelief. Royce walked toward her, clapping slowly, his rare smile touching his eyes. "You've outdone yourself again," he said. "You've silenced the room, and yet you've made them feel something they didn't expect. That is talent. That is heart." After the gala, several influential people approached her with offers and praise. One offered a scholarship to a prestigious music academy, another suggested a recording contract, and a third invited her to perform at a high-profile concert series. For Lena, it felt like the doors she had only dreamed about were finally opening. But success brought new challenges. With opportunities came pressure. Every note she played was now scrutinized, every performance analyzed. She began to feel the weight of expectation pressing down on her shoulders. Some nights she stayed awake, questioning whether she was truly ready for everything coming her way. One evening, while practicing alone in her apartment, Lena felt a pang of fear and doubt. The memory of performing in front of crowds still excited her, but now she worried about failing them, about disappointing those who believed in her. She pressed her hands to the keys, hesitated, then drew a deep breath. Her phone buzzed with a message from Royce. "Trust yourself. You've come this far because you believe in your music. Don't let doubt take that away." She smiled softly, feeling a wave of reassurance. It reminded her that she wasn't alone. Royce had become more than a mentor. He had become someone who believed in her when she couldn't fully believe in herself. The next morning, Lena resumed her lessons and rehearsals with renewed determination. She spent hours perfecting pieces, balancing her emotions with precision. She began to understand that the journey was not only about performing, but also about discipline, patience, and learning to trust herself fully. Weeks later, Lena received an invitation to perform at a well-known music festival. It was an opportunity she had only imagined in the quiet of her room. She felt nervous but ready. Royce has always encouraged her to focus on the music rather than the audience, to let her heart guide her fingers. The festival was unlike anything Lena had experienced. The hall was massive, filled with hundreds of spectators. Backstage, she felt her heart pound, a mixture of fear and excitement. She thought about the small dining hall where she had first played for Royce, the hush of the gala, and the intimate showcase. Those memories grounded her. When she stepped onto the stage and sat at the piano, she closed her eyes for a brief moment. She let the music flow naturally, each note carrying her journey, every chord resonating with honesty. The audience, initially whispering and shifting in their seats, gradually fell silent, captivated by the purity of her performance. For Lena, this was no longer just about impressing others. It was about sharing a piece of herself, the story of a girl who had once given up her dreams, who had been forced to play, and who had discovered her true voice. She played with confidence, with passion, and with the knowledge that every note mattered. When she finished, the audience erupted in applause, some standing, others wiping away tears. Royce, sitting quietly in the front row, clapped with genuine pride. Lena felt a sense of fulfillment she had never experienced before. She realized that the journey was not about perfection, recognition, or wealth. It was about the music itself and the ability to touch hearts. After the performance, Producers, teachers, and fellow musicians approached her with opportunities, advice, and encouragement. She was no longer just a waitress or a student. She was a pianist with a growing presence in the music world. And though the path ahead was still challenging, Lena felt ready to face it, armed with the lessons of courage, discipline, and self-belief she had learned along the way. That night, Lena returned home, exhausted but elated. She sat at her old keyboard and played quietly, not for anyone else but for herself. The music was familiar, comforting, and freeing. She realized that no matter what opportunities or pressures lay ahead, she would never lose the joy of playing, the joy that had carried her from a small dining hall to the grand stage. And as she closed her eyes, letting the last notes linger in the room, Lena knew that her journey was just beginning. There were challenges to come, decisions to make, and more stages to conquer. But for the first time, she felt truly capable, not because of anyone else's approval, but because she had found her own strength, her own voice, and her own music. Months had passed since Lena first sat at that grand piano in the hotel, the night that changed everything. Since then, her life had become a whirlwind of music, performances, and opportunities she had never imagined. She had performed at private events, charity galas, and even music festivals. Each experience brought its own lessons, its own challenges, and each time she played, she felt a little stronger, a little more herself. But despite the growing recognition and the letters of invitation that now filled her mailbox, Lena never forgot where she had started. She remembered the cold marble floors of the hotel lobby, the laughter of guests, the doubt in her own hands, and the hush that had fallen over the room the first time she played. That memory became her anchor, reminding her that every note she played was a connection to something deeper than applause or fame. It was about her heart, her story, and her passion. One crisp morning, Lena received a message from Royce. He had arranged for her to perform at a new event, a prestigious cultural evening in the city, one that would feature renowned musicians, artists, and dignitaries. It was larger than anything she had faced before. Her heart raced at the thought, but she also felt a quiet determination. She knew that this was another step in her journey, and she was ready to face it. The day of the event arrived with perfect weather, a clear sky and sunlight streaming through the tall windows of the cultural hall. Lena arrived early, dressed simply but elegantly, her focus on the piano waiting for her backstage. The hall was filled with an audience of hundreds, all buzzing quietly with anticipation. The grandeur of the room was intimidating, yet familiar in a way that reminded her of the hotel's gala night long ago. Backstage, she took a deep breath and let her fingers hover over the keys. Royce appeared beside her, giving her the same calm reassurance he had months ago. "Remember," he said softly, "play for yourself. Everything else will follow." She nodded, feeling the truth of his words settle inside her. This wasn't about proving herself to anyone else. This was about sharing the music that had always lived inside her, the melodies that had grown from pain, hope, and persistence. When her name was announced, Lena walked to the center of the stage. The spotlight touched her and she sat at the grand piano. The hall grew quiet as hundreds of eyes turned to her, waiting. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, remembering the first night, the first hush, the first feeling of something powerful stirring inside her. Then she placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The first notes were gentle, almost fragile, but with each passing measure they gained strength, depth, and emotion. Lena poured everything into her music. The struggles she had faced, the hours of practice, the nights she had doubted herself, and the moments she had triumphed over fear. Her hands moved with grace and confidence, the melody unfolding like a story that only she could tell. The audience sat mesmerized. Conversations faded completely. The clinking of glasses and the rustle of dresses disappeared, replaced by the rich flowing sound of the piano. Even the most distracted spectators leaned forward, caught in the honesty of her music. As she played, Lena noticed subtle reactions, a tear sliding down someone's cheek, a smile forming on another's face, hands clasped in silent admiration. She realized that her music was touching people in ways words never could. It was a humbling, beautiful feeling, knowing that something born from her heart could resonate so deeply with others.